He bought an abandoned hotel for $7,500, thinking he'd found a desperate way to give his daughter a home. But when Marcus Webb finally opened the sealed West Wing that had been locked for 47 years, what he discovered wasn't just worth $285 million. It was a secret so carefully hidden that powerful people had spent decades making sure no one would ever find it. This is the true story of how a broke single father's last chance gamble uncovered one of the greatest private art collections ever lost to history and changed his life forever. Before we dive into the story, make sure to smash subscribe because tomorrow we have an extra special story for you that will blow your mind. The morning light barely touched the mountains when Marcus Webb's alarm screamed at 5:30. He slapped it silent and lay in the dark of his cramped studio apartment, staring at the water-stained ceiling he'd memorized over 3 years. 34 years old, and this was his kingdom. 600 square feet split between him and his 8-year-old daughter Sophie. Her twin bed pressed against the far wall, separated from his by a hanging sheet he'd rigged up for privacy. She deserved so much more than this. Marcus swung his legs out of bed, his back already aching before the day began. Hotel maintenance manager sounded better than it paid. He worked at the Valley Chain Inn, a 2-star operation off the highway where people stayed when they couldn't afford better. The irony wasn't lost on him. He fixed broken air conditioners and clogged toilets for guests who had more than he did. But it paid the bills, barely. Sophie stirred behind the sheet. "Daddy?" "Morning, baby," Marcus whispered, pulling on his work pants. "Go back to sleep. You got another hour." "Is it waffle day at school?" Marcus's chest tightened. She remembered the breakfast schedule because most days that free school breakfast was the best meal she got. "Yeah, sweetheart, waffle day." He heard her settle back into the pillow, and he stood there for a moment in the dark, his jaw clenched. 3 years since Sophie's mother walked out, just left a note on the counter that said she wasn't cut out for this life and disappeared. No calls, no birthday cards, nothing. Sophie asked about her less and less, but Marcus knew the absence carved deeper than words could reach. He grabbed his thermos, filled it with the cheapest coffee that tasted like rust, and headed out into the cold November morning. The mountains of North Carolina rose dark against the purple sky. Beautiful country. He just wished he had time to notice. By noon, Marcus was elbow-deep in a broken furnace at the Valley Inn when his phone buzzed. Text from his neighbor, Mrs. Chen. She watched Sophie after school for $20 a week, money Marcus could barely spare but had no choice. The message was simple. Sophie asking about Thanksgiving again, told her we'd figure it out. Thanksgiving was 2 weeks away. Last year they'd eaten gas station sandwiches because Marcus had to work a double shift. Sophie never complained. She never complained about anything, and that broke his heart more than if she had. Marcus finished the furnace repair, washed the grease from his hands, and sat in his truck in the parking lot. He pulled out his phone and did what he'd been doing every night for 6 months, scrolling real estate listings he couldn't afford, dreaming of a place Sophie could have her own room, maybe a yard. Somewhere that felt like a home instead of a storage unit they slept in. That's when he saw it. The listing was buried at the bottom of the county auction page, probably because no one wanted it. Grandview Winter Hotel, historic property, closed since 2001. Starting bid $7,500. Marcus stared at the screen. $7,500? For an entire hotel? He clicked through. The photos showed a massive 3-story stone building tucked into the mountains about 40 minutes outside Asheville. It looked rough, peeling paint, broken windows, weeds growing through the parking lot. But the bones were there. The architecture was stunning. 1930s construction, the listing said. 95 rooms total. His hands shook as he scrolled. There had to be a catch. There was always a catch. He found it in the description. West Wing sealed since 1978 per county order. Buyer responsible for all inspection and remediation. Property sold as is. Closed wing remains sealed and is not accessible for viewing. Marcus read it 3 times. Sealed since 1978. That was 47 years ago. Why would an entire wing be sealed? He searched for more information, but found almost nothing. The hotel had been abandoned for 22 years after the previous owner died. No heirs. Went to the county for unpaid taxes. He looked at the starting bid again. $7,500. Marcus opened his banking app. His savings account showed $8,217. 3 years of scraped-together money. Every overtime shift, every skipped meal, every time he wore boots with holes because Sophie needed new shoes. That money was supposed to be for Sophie's future. College maybe, or trade school, or just a cushion so she wouldn't grow up as scared as he was. But what if? What if he could buy this place? Fix it up room by room. Even if he just got 10 rooms running, he could operate a small bed and breakfast, be his own boss, give Sophie a real home, a yard, space to breathe. Marcus sat in that truck for 20 minutes, his coffee going cold, his heart hammering. This was insane. He didn't know anything about running a hotel. He'd never bought property before, and that sealed wing, who knew what was wrong with it? Asbestos, structural damage, mold, could be anything, but $7,500. He called the county office. A bored woman answered. "Yeah, the Grandview auction. It's this Saturday at 10 a.m. at the property. You planning to bid?" "Maybe," Marcus said. "Can you tell me why the west wing is sealed?" "Hold on." Papers shuffled. Says here original owner requested closure in 78. Structural concerns possibly. We maintain the seal as part of the property conditions. Structural concerns possibly, Marcus repeated. You don't know for sure? Sir, this property has been county-owned for 18 years. Original documentation was lost in the courthouse fire of '04. We just maintain what's there. Marcus thanked her and hung up. He sat back, staring at the mountains. A courthouse fire, lost documentation, a sealed wing no one had seen in 47 years. Every logical part of his brain screamed this was a disaster waiting to happen. But desperation has a way of drowning out logic. That night, after Sophie went to bed behind her curtain, Marcus sat at their tiny kitchen table with a notebook and calculator. He ran numbers until his eyes blurred. If he bid 7,501, he'd have 700 left. Not enough for first month's operating costs, not enough for repairs, barely enough for gas to get there and back. He'd have to get a loan, use the property as collateral. Banks would laugh him out the door. He put his head in his hands. This was stupid. He should just keep saving, keep grinding, keep hoping something better came along. "Daddy?" Marcus looked up. Sophie stood there in her 2 small pajamas, the ones with the faded unicorns that she refused to throw away, even though the cuffs barely reached her wrists anymore. "Hey, baby. You should be sleeping." "I heard you moving around." She climbed into the chair across from him. "What are you doing?" Marcus looked at his notebook, at the scribbled numbers and crossed-out plans. He should lie, tell her it was work stuff. But he was so tired of lying to make things seem better than they were. "I'm looking at a house," he said quietly. "Well, a hotel, actually, a big old building up in the mountains." Sophie's eyes went wide. "Like a real hotel, with lots of rooms?" "Yeah, it needs a lot of work, though." "Could we live there?" Marcus's throat tightened. "Maybe. If we could fix it up. You'd have your own room. Big windows. Maybe we could even get a dog." Sophie gasped. She'd been asking for a dog since she was 5. Marcus had always said the apartment didn't allow pets, which was true, but even if it did, he couldn't afford to feed another mouth. "Really? A real dog?" "Maybe," Marcus said again. "But Sophie, this is just me thinking out loud. It's probably not going to happen." Sophie stood up and walked around the table. She wrapped her skinny arms around his neck and pressed her cheek against his. I think you should try, Daddy. I think we should have a real home. Marcus closed his eyes. She smelled like the cheap shampoo from the dollar store, and hope, pure, uncomplicated hope. Okay, he whispered. Okay, I'll try. Saturday morning arrived cold and sharp. Marcus had barely slept. He'd spent the last 3 days researching everything he could about the Grandview Winter Hotel, built in 1932 by a wealthy industrialist named George Hartley. It had been a luxury mountain resort through the 50s and 60s. Weddings, society events, even hosted a few movie stars back in the day. But something changed in the 70s. The hotel became more private, less social. Then, in 1978, Hartley sealed the entire West Wing. No explanation, no press release. Hartley died in 1998 at 86 years old. No wife, no children, no apparent heirs. The hotel sat empty until the county took it for taxes in 2006. Marcus found a few local news articles calling it an eyesore, a failed attempt to sell it at auction in 2012. No one bid then either. The starting price had been $30,000. Now it was $7,500. Sophie sat in the passenger seat of Marcus's truck, bundled in her winter coat, chattering about what color she'd paint her room. Marcus's hands gripped the steering wheel so tight his knuckles went white. In his pocket was a cashier's check for $8,000, everything he had. The drive into the mountains took 45 minutes. The road narrowed, trees pressing in on both sides. Then the forest opened up, and there it was, the Grandview Winter Hotel. Marcus pulled into the weed-choked parking lot and just stared. The building was massive. 3 stories of stone and timber, built in the classic Grand Mountain Lodge style. A wide-covered porch wrapped the front. Tall windows, most of them broken or boarded. The roof sagged in places. Paint peeled from the window frames like old skin. But God, it was beautiful. Even in decay, even abandoned, it had dignity. It had history. Marcus could see what it had been, and more importantly, what it could be again. "Daddy, it looks like a castle," Sophie breathed. "Yeah, baby, it does." There were maybe a dozen people gathered near the front steps. Marcus recognized the type. A couple of curiosity seekers, a local developer in an expensive coat, a few people with cameras, probably hoping for some urban exploration content. The county auctioneer was a grey-haired man in a county jacket, holding a clipboard and looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. He checked his watch. "All right, folks, it's 10 o'clock. Let's get this over with. I'm Frank Hoskins, County Property Manager. You're here for the auction of the Grandview Winter Hotel, Property 372-9. This is an as-is sale. You bid, you win, you own it, and everything that comes with it." He gestured to the building. 95 rooms total, 3 floors. West Wing has been sealed since 1978 and will remain sealed per county regulations. Structural assessment required before any access granted. County makes no warranties, no guarantees. You're buying it sight unseen on the sealed wing. We clear? A few people nodded. Marcus's heart hammered. "Starting bid is $7,500. Do I have $7,500? Silence. Marcus looked around. The developer was on his phone, not paying attention. The others looked bored. "Come on, folks," Hoskins said. $7,500 for a historic property. That's less than a used car." More silence. Marcus raised his hand before he could stop himself. $7,500. Heads turned. Hoskins looked almost surprised. "We have $7,500. Do I hear 8,000? The developer glanced up from his phone, looked at Marcus, then at the building. He shook his head and went back to his phone. "Anyone? 8,000? Hoskins waited. "This is a steal, folks, going once at 7,500. Marcus's pulse roared in his ears. "Going twice." Sophie grabbed his hand, squeezed tight. "Sold. $7,500 to the gentleman in the back." Just like that, it was over. Marcus Webb, single father, hotel maintenance worker, part-time dreamer, now owned a 95-room abandoned hotel. He felt like he might throw up. The paperwork took an hour. Hoskins walked him through deed transfer, tax information, liability releases. Sophie sat on the porch steps, swinging her legs, humming to herself. "You know what you're getting into?" Hoskins asked quietly as Marcus signed the final form. "No, sir, I really don't." Hoskins almost smiled. "Well, you got guts. I'll give you that. Here's your keys." He handed over a heavy brass key ring with maybe a dozen keys. Main entrance, side doors, boiler room, office. The county kept basic utilities on, don't ask me why. Electric bill gets paid from some old trust fund. Water's well-based. Heat's propane, tanks probably empty. And the West Wing? Hoskins pointed to two keys that looked different from the others. Heavy, industrial. Those open the main access doors. But son, that wing's been sealed for 47 years for a reason. You open those doors, you're liable for whatever you find. What am I going to find? Don't know. Original owner insisted on the closure. County's maintained it ever since. Could be structural damage, could be environmental hazards, could be nothing. But the seal stays until you get proper inspections and permits. Marcus pocketed the keys. They felt heavy, important, dangerous. He signed the last paper. Hoskins shook his hand. "Good luck. You're going to need it." By the time everyone else left, it was just Marcus and Sophie standing in the empty parking lot, staring at their new home. The afternoon sun broke through the clouds, hitting the windows just right, and for a moment the whole building seemed to glow. "Can we go inside?" Sophie asked. Marcus looked down at the brass keys in his hand. He found the one marked Main and walked up the stone steps. The front door was massive, dark wood with iron hinges. The key slid in smoothly, almost too smoothly for something supposedly abandoned for 22 years. The lock clicked. The door swung open with a low groan. They stepped inside. The lobby took Marcus's breath away. It was enormous. 20-foot ceilings, exposed timber beams, a grand stone fireplace that could fit a car inside. The floor was marble, dulled by years of dust but still intact. A massive chandelier hung from the center, crystals clouded but unbroken. The reception desk curved along one wall, carved mahogany with brass fixtures. Everything was frozen in time. Dusty, yes. Aged, absolutely. But not destroyed, not vandalized. It was like the hotel had simply gone to sleep. Sophie's footsteps echoed as she ran across the marble. "Daddy, listen!" She stomped her feet, and the sound bounced off the walls. She laughed, and it filled the whole space. Marcus walked slowly through the lobby, running his hand along the desk. Behind it, mail slots still held old envelopes. A guest ledger sat open, the last entry dated November 8, 2001. He flipped back through pages. Names, dates, room numbers, lives passing through. "Come look at this," Sophie called from a doorway. Marcus followed her voice into what had been the main dining hall. Long wooden tables, chairs stacked neatly against the walls, a wall of windows overlooking the mountains. The view was spectacular. Even through dirty glass, even with weeds grown wild in what used to be gardens, it was breathtaking. They explored for hours, the kitchen with its ancient stoves and walk-in freezers. The second floor with endless hallways of guest rooms, each one a time capsule. Some had furniture still in them, beds with old quilts, dressers. One room had a suitcase sitting on the luggage rack, like someone left for breakfast and never came back. It was eerie, but not frightening. Sad, maybe. Forgotten. Then they reached the West Wing. The hallway ended at a set of double doors unlike any others in the hotel. These were steel, painted to look like wood but clearly reinforced. Heavy chains wrapped through the handles, secured with industrial padlocks. A faded county notice was stapled to the door. Condemned by Order of County Board, 1978. Do not enter. Sophie pressed her hand against the metal. "What's behind them, Daddy?" "I don't know, baby." "Are we going to open them?" Marcus looked at the chains, at the keys in his hand. He knew he shouldn't. The county guy was clear. Inspections first, permits, proper procedure. But standing there, looking at doors that had been sealed for 47 years, he felt something. Curiosity, yes, but more than that, a pull, like the building wanted to tell him something. "Not yet," he said. "We need to make the rest of the place livable first." They spent that first night in what had been the manager's suite on the first floor. Marcus found old linens in a supply closet and made up the bed. It smelled musty, but not moldy. Sophie was asleep within minutes, exhausted from exploring. Marcus sat in a chair by the window, looking out at the mountains turning purple in the dusk. What had he done? He'd just spent every penny on a building he couldn't afford to repair. He had no plan, no income, no idea what came next. But for the first time in 3 years, Sophie had her own room. For the first time since her mother left, they had space, potential, possibility. He must have dozed off because he woke to a sound, faint, rhythmic, humming. Marcus sat up, instantly alert. The room was dark except for moonlight through the windows. The sound was still there. A low electrical hum, steady and constant, coming from somewhere below. He grabbed his phone, turned on the flashlight, and stepped into the hallway. The sound was clearer now. Definitely electrical. He followed it through the lobby, down a side corridor, to a door marked Utilities. The door was unlocked. Inside, a steep staircase led down to the basement. The humming grew louder. The basement was cleaner than Marcus expected. Concrete floors, exposed pipes along the ceiling. He followed the sound past the old boiler, past stacks of chairs and tables, to the far corner. There, mounted on the wall, were 2 electrical panels. One was dark, dead. The other glowed with small green lights. Active. Marcus stared. The county guy said basic utilities were on. But this wasn't basic. This panel was modern, maybe 10 years old, and it was only connected to one set of breakers. He followed the conduit with his flashlight. It ran along the ceiling, through the wall, heading toward the west wing. The sealed west wing had its own dedicated power supply, and it was active. Marcus's mouth went dry. He walked along the basement wall, following the conduit. It led to another door, this one hidden behind old shelving. He moved the shelves aside. The door was old wood, swollen with moisture but not locked. He pulled. It opened with a groan. Stone steps led down into darkness, carved into the rock of the mountain itself. The air that drifted up was cool and dry. Not musty, not stale, controlled. Marcus stood at the top of those stairs for a long time, his heart hammering. Every instinct said to close the door, go back upstairs, wait for proper inspections like the county ordered. But that hum, that steady electrical hum from something that had been sealed for 47 years. Someone had been maintaining this, paying for electricity, keeping something running. Marcus descended 1 step, then another. His phone's flashlight beam bounced off stone walls. 10 steps down, he found a light switch. He hesitated, then flipped it. Lights flickered on overhead. Lead strips, clean and modern, illuminating a corridor carved through bedrock. This wasn't decay. This was preservation. The corridor stretched ahead, perfectly level, about 50 feet long. At the end, another door. This one was different. Steel with a modern electronic keypad mounted beside it. Marcus approached slowly. The keypad glowed red. Locked. But as he got closer, he noticed something. The door wasn't completely sealed. It was open maybe half an inch, like the locking mechanism had failed. He pressed against it gently. The door moved. Marcus stood there, hand on cold steel, breathing hard. Behind this door was something someone had spent decades hiding, protecting, powering. Something important enough to seal an entire wing of a hotel. Important enough to maintain for 47 years. He pushed the door open. The space beyond stole his breath. It was a gallery. A massive underground gallery carved from the mountain itself. Cathedral ceilings maybe 20 feet high. perfect lighting from overhead tracks, climate control humming softly. And on every wall, protected behind glass cases, were paintings. Not prints, originals. Marcus took 3 steps inside and froze. His knowledge of art was limited, but he knew enough. He'd seen these images before, in books, in documentaries, in museums. On his left, a Van Gogh. The brushstrokes unmistakable, the colors vivid even in the controlled light. Beside it, a Monet. Water lilies, dreamy and perfect. He turned in a slow circle. Rembrandt. Renoir. Picasso. Names he recognized, even if he couldn't explain their importance. Sculptures stood on pedestals throughout the space. Marble, bronze, some he couldn't identify. In the center of the gallery, on a raised platform, sat a glass case. Inside, a leather-bound book. Marcus walked toward it like a man in a dream. His hands shook as he opened the case and lifted the book. The cover read, Hartley Collection, Private Catalogue, completed 1978. He opened it to the first page. 67 pieces, each one photographed, documented, authenticated. Purchase dates ranging from 1943 to 1977. Provenance, artist information, condition notes. At the back, a handwritten page. Total collection value as of April 1978, $38 million. Marcus's legs gave out. He sat hard on the floor, the book in his lap, his vision swimming. $38 million in 1978. What would that be worth now? His brain tried to calculate but couldn't. Double, triple, more. He looked around the gallery again, at the masterpieces hanging in perfect climate control, preserved flawlessly for 47 years while the world forgot they existed. And he owned them. Marcus Webb, who couldn't afford new boots, who counted pennies for his daughter's school lunch, who had spent his last dollar on a broken hotel, now sat in the middle of what might be one of the greatest private art collections in history. He started laughing. It came out choked, half sob. This was impossible. This didn't happen to people like him. But the paintings didn't disappear. The gallery didn't vanish. It was real. All of it was real. And somewhere in the hotel above, his daughter slept peacefully, dreaming of her own room and maybe getting a dog, with no idea that her father had just stumbled into a discovery that would change everything. Marcus sat on that gallery floor until his phone battery died, plunging him into darkness lit only by the soft track lighting above priceless art, and he wondered if he'd just found salvation or opened a door to something far more dangerous than he could possibly imagine. Marcus didn't tell Sophie what he'd found, not yet. How could he explain something he barely understood himself? He climbed back up those stone stairs as dawn broke over the mountains, his mind spinning like a broken compass. He locked the basement door behind him and went to wake his daughter for breakfast, moving like a ghost through his own life. Sophie bounded out of bed, thrilled about her new room, talking non-stop about where she'd put her stuffed animals. Marcus made her cereal with powdered milk because he'd forgotten to buy groceries, and she didn't complain. She never complained. "Daddy, you okay?" she asked, mouth full of generic Cheerios. "You look weird." "Just tired, baby. Didn't sleep much." "Because you're excited about our new house?" Marcus looked at her across their makeshift table in the manager's suite. Her hair stuck up in the back. She wore the same clothes from yesterday because all their stuff was still in boxes. She grinned at him with a milk mustache, and his chest ached so hard he could barely breathe. "Yeah," he managed, "something like that." After he dropped Sophie at school, Marcus drove straight to the public library in Asheville. He needed internet better than his phone's spotty data. He needed answers. He spent 6 hours in a corner cubicle searching everything he could find about George Hartley and the Grandview Winter Hotel. What he discovered was more questions than answers. George Hartley, born 1912, inherited a steel fortune from his father in 1938. Never married, though there were rumors about a long-term companion who died in the early 60s. No children, spent the 40s and 50s collecting art, apparently with an expert's eye and unlimited funds. The hotel had been his private retreat. He'd open it occasionally for society events, but mostly it was his sanctuary. Then in 1967, Hartley's adopted son, Thomas, came into his life. A nephew who'd been orphaned, 23 years old. They'd grown close. Thomas shared his love of art. Then Marcus found the article that changed everything. Thomas Hartley killed in car accident, July 19, 1978. Thomas had been driving home to the hotel after picking up a painting George had purchased. Lost control on a mountain curve. Died instantly. He was 34, the same age Marcus was now. George Hartley sealed the West Wing 2 weeks later. No public statement, no explanation. The hotel continued operating for another 23 years, but that wing stayed locked. After George died in 1998, the hotel limped along for 3 more years before finally closing. Marcus sat back, his throat tight. George had sealed away his entire collection because he couldn't bear to look at it after losing his son. They'd built that gallery together. Every piece had been shared joy, and after Thomas died it became unbearable grief. So George had buried it, locked it away, kept it preserved but hidden, like a tomb for all the happiness he'd lost. Marcus understood that kind of pain. The kind that made you want to seal off entire parts of yourself because looking at them hurt too much. He printed everything he could afford at 10 cents a page and drove back to the hotel. Sophie wouldn't be out of school for another 3 hours. He had time. The gallery pulled at him like gravity. He stood at the top of those basement stairs, keys in hand, knowing he should leave it alone. Get proper appraisals, legal advice, expert opinions. Instead, he descended. The lights still worked. The climate control still hummed. Marcus walked slowly through the space, really looking this time. Each painting had a small brass plaque with title, Artist, Year. He recognized maybe a third of them by sight. The others he photographed with his phone and searched. A Rothko, a Klimt, a Degas. Each search result made his hands shake harder. Current auction value, 12 million. Current auction value, 18 million. Current auction value, 23 million. He stopped searching. The numbers stopped meaning anything. They were too big, too impossible. This wasn't wealth. This was history. This was legacy. In the corner, he found something he'd missed the night before. A small office space carved into the rock. A desk, filing cabinets, shelves of art books. Everything covered in dust except one thing. A folder sitting on the desk, leather embossed with George Hartley's initials. Marcus opened it with trembling fingers. Inside were letters, dozens of them, handwritten correspondence between George and Thomas, spanning years. They talked about art, about beauty, about what it meant to preserve something precious in an ugly world. The last letter was dated July 10, 1978, 9 days before Thomas died. Father, it read, I know you worry about what happens to the collection after we're gone. I've been thinking about your idea for a foundation, something that would share these pieces with people who otherwise would never see them. Not a museum that charges admission and keeps out the poor. Something accessible, something that reminds people beauty isn't just for the wealthy. Let's talk more when I return. I found the Matisse you've been seeking. I think you'll weep when you see it. Your son, Thomas. Marcus read it 3 times. The Matisse hung on the far wall, a riot of color and life. George must have received it the day his son died. Beneath the letters, Marcus found legal documents, a trust agreement dated 1977. George Hartley's plan for a public foundation to house and share his collection. It was detailed, thought out, funded, ready to execute, but it was never signed. The signature lines at the bottom sat empty. Marcus understood. After Thomas died, George couldn't follow through, couldn't open that beauty to the world when all he felt was darkness. So he'd sealed it away and let the plans die with his grief. The trust had dissolved years ago. The lawyer was dead. The funding dispersed to other charities. The collection belonged to whoever owned the property. It belonged to Marcus. He sat at that dust-covered desk and put his head in his hands. This wasn't just a discovery. It was a responsibility. These paintings weren't meant to stay buried. Thomas and George had wanted to share them, to make art accessible to regular people, people like Marcus, people who would never set foot in a five-star museum. But how? He didn't have money for insurance, didn't know the first thing about art authentication or preservation or security. He was a maintenance guy who could barely keep his truck running. His phone rang. Sophie's school. "Mr. Webb, this is Principal Morrison. Sophie's fine, but we need to discuss her lunch account. It's overdrawn again. We've been covering it, but district policy requires—" "I'll bring money tomorrow," Marcus said, his voice hollow. "I'm sorry. It won't happen again." He hung up, stared at a painting worth more than his hometown. Couldn't pay for his daughter's school lunch. The absurdity of it hit him like a punch. He started laughing again, that same choked sound from last night. Here he sat, surrounded by unimaginable wealth, and he still couldn't afford chicken nuggets. Because none of this was liquid. None of it was usable. It was all potential, all promise, all completely out of his reach until he figured out what the hell to do with it. Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus fell into an obsessive routine. Mornings, he'd work on the main hotel, fixing broken windows, clearing rooms, trying to make the place habitable. Afternoons, after Sophie got home, they'd explore together. She loved the grand rooms, the mountain views, the space to run and play. But at night, after she fell asleep, Marcus would descend to the gallery. He'd sit among the paintings and read everything he could find on his phone about art collection, authentication, insurance, museum operations. He filled notebooks with plans that seemed more impossible each day. The reality was crushing. To properly ensure this collection would cost hundreds of thousands annually. To get it authenticated would require experts who charged tens of thousands per piece. To secure it properly would mean installing systems he couldn't begin to afford. And he couldn't sell them quietly. Art at this level had provenance requirements, ownership chains, legal documentation. One piece hitting the market would draw attention. 67 would draw investigations. He was sitting on a fortune he couldn't touch, in a building he couldn't afford to maintain, with a daughter whose school lunch he couldn't pay for. The bills started arriving. Property taxes, utility bills now that the property was privately owned again, insurance companies refusing coverage without full inspections. Marcus's savings dwindled to $300, then $100, then $42. Sophie started asking why they were eating so much pasta. Marcus told her he was on a diet. Thanksgiving came. They ate spaghetti because Marcus couldn't afford a turkey. Sophie made a construction paper cornucopia at school and put it on their table. She held his hand and said grace, thanking God for their new home. Marcus blinked back tears. That night, he stood in the gallery and faced the truth. He was going to lose everything. The hotel would go back to the county for unpaid taxes within months. And this collection, this incredible legacy that George and Thomas had built, would be discovered by someone else. Someone with resources. Someone who'd probably carve it up and sell it to private collectors, exactly what George had feared. Marcus couldn't let that happen, wouldn't let that happen, but he needed help. Real help. Expert help. He pulled out his phone and started searching for art historians in North Carolina. The list was long. He needed someone credible but approachable. Someone who might take a call from a random nobody claiming to have found a lost collection. Then he found her, Dr. Ellen Chase, professor of art history at Duke University, published author, expert in 20th century American collections, and most importantly, she'd written articles about lost and rediscovered art, approaching the subject with respect for the original owner's intentions rather than just market value. Her faculty page listed an email. Marcus stared at it for 20 minutes before typing. Dr. Chase, my name is Marcus Webb. I recently purchased an abandoned property in western North Carolina. In the basement, I discovered what appears to be a significant private art collection that's been sealed since 1978. I've documented over 60 pieces that may be authentic works by major artists. I need expert authentication, but have limited resources. Would you be willing to review photographs before I proceed? This isn't a hoax. I can provide property records and any verification you need. I believe this collection was meant to be shared, not sold, and I'm trying to honor that intention. Please help if you can. Marcus Webb. He attached a dozen photos of paintings with their plaques visible, plus a photo of the catalogue cover. Then he hit send before he could overthink it. For 3 days, nothing. Marcus checked his email obsessively. He'd probably sounded insane. A maintenance worker claiming to have stumbled on masterpieces. She probably got emails like that weekly from crackpots. On the 4th day, while Marcus was fixing a leaking pipe in one of the second-floor bathrooms, his phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Is this Marcus Webb? A woman's voice, professional but cautious. Yes, ma'am. This is Ellen Chase. I got your email. Marcus sat down hard on the bathroom floor. Thank you for calling. I know it sounds crazy. Mr. Webb, those photographs, where exactly did you take them? In a sealed gallery beneath the hotel I just purchased. The Grandview Winter Hotel, about 40 miles west of Asheville. Silence. Then, the Hartley Estate. You know it? Every serious art historian knows about George Hartley's collection. It's been considered lost since his death. There were rumors he'd sealed it away, but no one knew where. Most assumed it had been sold off quietly. Her voice sharpened. Those photographs are real? You have physical access to these pieces? Yes, ma'am. All 67 of them. They're in perfect condition. Climate-controlled, sealed gallery. I have the original catalogue. Another long pause. Mr. Webb, if this is authentic, you're sitting on one of the most significant private art discoveries in decades. Those pieces alone that you photographed, if they're genuine, would be worth over $100 million. Marcus closed his eyes. Hearing someone else say it made it real in a way it hadn't been before. Can you come see them? He asked. I don't know what to do. I can't afford authentication or insurance or any of it, but I can't let these paintings get sold off piece by piece either. The original owner wanted them shared with regular people. He had plans for a foundation. I know, Dr. Chase said quietly. I wrote my dissertation partially on Hartley's collecting philosophy. He believed art shouldn't be locked away for the elite. She paused. I can be there tomorrow, but Mr. Webb, before I come, you need to understand something. Once I verify this, once word gets out, your life is going to change. People will come after this collection. Lawyers, collectors, the IRS, possibly Hartley's distant relatives. You need to be prepared. I'm not prepared for anything, Marcus said honestly. I'm a single dad who spent his last dollar buying this place so my daughter could have her own room. I don't know what I'm doing, but I know these paintings deserve better than sitting in the dark. Then I'll see you tomorrow, Dr. Chase said. And Mr. Webb, don't tell anyone else about this. Not yet. Not until we know exactly what you have. She hung up. Marcus sat on that bathroom floor for a long time, listening to water drip from the pipe he'd been fixing. His hands shook. Tomorrow, an expert would confirm whether he'd really found a fortune or if he'd just lost his mind from stress and desperation. Either way, everything was about to change. Dr. Ellen Chase arrived at 9 the next morning in a sensible Honda, carrying a professional camera and a leather bag that looked older than Marcus. She was maybe 50, grey, streaking through dark hair pulled into a bun, wire-rimmed glasses, and an expression of barely controlled excitement. Mr. Webb? Call me Marcus, please. They shook hands. Hers were steady. His weren't. I didn't sleep last night, she admitted. I kept looking at those photos you sent. If they're real, if the collection is intact. She trailed off, shaking her head. Show me. Marcus led her through the hotel. She asked questions about how he'd found the gallery, about the building's history, about the sealed wing. He answered honestly, watching her process everything with the careful attention of someone who knew how to spot a fraud. They reached the basement door. Marcus unlocked it and they descended. The gallery lights flickered on. Dr. Chase stopped at the bottom of the stairs. Her hand went to her mouth. "Oh my God," she whispered. She walked forward slowly, like someone approaching a religious shrine. She stopped in front of the Van Gogh, pulled out a magnifying loupe from her bag, examined the brushwork for 5 solid minutes without speaking, then the Monet, then the Rembrandt. Marcus stood back, letting her work. She photographed everything, took notes in a small journal. Occasionally she'd make a sound, soft and amazed. After 2 hours, she sat down on the floor in front of the Rothko, just staring up at it. "It's real," she said. "All of it. Marcus, this is real." "You're sure?" "I'll need to bring in specialists for formal authentication. Carbon dating on the canvases, paint analysis, provenance verification. But yes, I'd stake my career on it. This is the Hartley collection, intact, perfectly preserved." She looked at him, her eyes wet. "Do you understand what you have here? A lot of expensive paintings I can't afford to protect?" She almost laughed. "Yes, but more than that. This collection represents one of the finest examples of 20th century art acquisition by a private collector. Hartley had an incredible eye. He bought these pieces not as investments, but because he loved them. Some of these were considered minor works when he purchased them. They're masterpieces now." She stood and walked to the center platform where the catalogue sat in its glass case. "May I?" Marcus nodded. She lifted the catalogue reverently, turning pages with careful fingers. "His valuation's from 78, she murmured. 38 million total." She looked up. "Marcus, the current market value of this collection is easily 250 million, probably closer to 300. Some of these pieces haven't been seen publicly in 60 years. Collectors would lose their minds." The number didn't feel real. It was too big, too abstract. Marcus sat down on the stone floor. "What do I do?" he asked quietly. Dr. Chase sat across from him. "That depends. What do you want to do?" "I want to honor what George and Thomas wanted. They planned to share this, make it accessible. But I also need to keep my daughter fed and this building from getting condemned." He looked at her. "Is there a way to do both?" She thought for a long moment. "Maybe. It would require establishing a non-profit foundation, deed the collection to it, bring in board members, experts, administrators, open it as a public museum with free or low-cost admission. You could draw a salary as director or curator. Keep the hotel as the housing for the collection, renovate it properly. I don't have money for any of that." "You wouldn't need it up front. There are grants for cultural preservation, foundations that support art accessibility. If we document this properly, if we build a strong proposal based on Hartley's original intentions, we could secure funding." She leaned forward. "But Marcus, this will take time, months, maybe a year, and the moment we start that process, the moment we announce this discovery, you need to be ready for the storm. What happens next will turn Marcus's quiet discovery into a public spectacle that threatens everything he's trying to protect, reveals truths nobody expected, and reminds us why some legacies are worth fighting for against impossible odds. Stay tuned to see what happens next. If you're enjoying the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more." "What kind of storm?" Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer would be bad. Dr. Chase pulled out her phone and showed him a news article. Last year, a man in Pennsylvania found a single Matisse in his grandmother's attic, worth about $8 million. Within a week, he had the IRS investigating him for tax evasion, distant relatives suing for ownership, and 3 attempted break-ins. She put her phone away. "You have 67 pieces worth 30 times that. The attention will be intense." Marcus thought of Sophie, safe at school, unaware that her father was sitting on a secret that could destroy their lives as easily as save them. "There's another option," Dr. Chase said carefully. You could sell. Contact a major auction house. They'd handle everything. Auction the collection piece by piece over several years. You'd be wealthy beyond anything you've imagined. Set for life. Your daughter's education paid for. Retirement secured. But the paintings would go to private collectors, Marcus said. Locked away in mansions and bank vaults. Exactly what George feared. Yes. Marcus stood and walked to the far wall where Thomas's letter still sat in the folder on the desk. He picked it up and read it again. Something that reminds people beauty isn't just for the wealthy. He turned back to Dr. Chase. I grew up poor. Still am poor. My daughter's school lunch account is overdrawn. I wear boots with holes in them. I've never been to a real art museum because I couldn't afford the admission and gas money. His voice thickened. But standing here, looking at these paintings, I feel something. Something that makes me feel less small, less forgotten. He looked at Dr. Chase directly. How many people like me never get to feel that because art gets treated like a commodity instead of a gift? How many kids like Sophie grow up thinking beauty isn't for them? Dr. Chase smiled, and it was warm and genuine. Then we build the foundation. We do this right. Over the next week, Dr. Chase brought in 2 trusted colleagues, a paintings conservator and a provenance specialist. They worked quietly, documenting everything, taking samples for analysis, photographing from every angle. Marcus watched them work with the reverence of people who understood they were part of something historic. The conservator, a precise woman named Judith, examined each painting for condition. Whoever set up this climate control knew what they were doing, she said. These pieces are in remarkable shape. Minimal degradation, the seals held. The provenance specialist, an elderly man named Howard, went through the catalogue and cross-referenced it with auction records and museum databases. Every piece checks out, he confirmed. Hartley's purchase records are meticulous. Original bills of sale, export documents, everything. The ownership chain is clean. On the 5th day, Dr. Chase called Marcus into the gallery. The 3 specialists stood together, and their faces were solemn. We have our preliminary report, Dr. Chase said. All 67 pieces are authentic. The collection's current estimated value is $285 million. The number hit Marcus like a physical force, 285 million. However, Howard added, there are complications. Several of these pieces were reported to insurance companies as lost or stolen decades ago. Not by Hartley, but by their previous owners during World War II. Those claims were paid out. Technically, some insurance companies could argue they own the pieces now. Marcus's stomach dropped. So I might not actually own them? You own them, Dr. Chase assured him. But there will be legal challenges. We'll need lawyers, good ones. I can't afford lawyers. You won't need to, Judith said. If we're establishing a non-profit foundation, we can apply for pro bono legal representation from firms that specialize in cultural heritage. It'll be part of the foundation work. Dr. Chase pulled out a folder. Marcus, I've drafted a preliminary plan. We announce the discovery through a carefully coordinated press release. Simultaneously, we file for non-profit status for the Hartley Legacy Foundation. We bring in board members, people with credibility in the art world who support accessibility missions. We apply for a national endowment for the arts grant to cover initial operating costs, and we start renovation on the hotel to serve as the museum. How long will all that take? 6 to 8 months if we move fast. I can't pay property taxes for 6 to 8 months. I have about $12 in my bank account. Dr. Chase exchanged glances with her colleagues. Judith spoke up. We can front you some money, personal loans, enough to keep the lights on while we work through the process. I can't accept that. You can and you will, Dr. Chase said firmly. Because this is bigger than you now, Marcus. This collection represents something important. George and Thomas wanted to share it. You want to honor that. We want to help make it happen. Let us help. Marcus looked at these three strangers who'd spent a week in his basement, who believed in something enough to put their own money behind it. He didn't know what to say. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay." That night, after everyone left, after Sophie was asleep, Marcus sat alone in the gallery one more time before everything changed. He walked from painting to painting, really looking at them, not thinking about dollar amounts or legal challenges, just seeing them. The colors, the brushstrokes, the moments frozen in time by artists who'd been dead for decades. Each one was evidence that someone had once felt something strongly enough to capture it forever. He stopped in front of a small painting he'd overlooked before. A simple landscape, mountains at sunset. The plaque read, "Untitled Vista, 1962, Thomas Hartley." Marcus stared. Thomas had painted this. George's son, the young man who died at 34, the same age Marcus was now. He'd painted these mountains, probably from the hotel's windows, probably sitting beside his father, both of them finding peace in creation. Tears ran down Marcus's face before he could stop them. For George, for Thomas, for the family they'd built through art and then lost to tragedy. For the beauty they'd created that had sat in darkness for 47 years waiting for someone to let it breathe again. And for Sophie, sleeping upstairs, who would grow up in a place where beauty was accessible, where art wasn't locked behind velvet ropes and admission fees, where a kid from nowhere could stand in front of a masterpiece and feel seen. Marcus Webb had bought this hotel for $7,500, hoping to give his daughter a home. Instead, he'd found a mission, a purpose, a chance to build something that mattered. The money would come with complications he couldn't imagine yet. The attention would be overwhelming. The legal battles would be exhausting. But standing there among those paintings, Marcus knew he'd made the right choice. Some things were worth more than wealth. Some legacies deserved protection. And some broke single fathers were exactly the right people to guard them. He locked the gallery and climbed back upstairs. Tomorrow, Dr. Chase would make the calls that would set everything in motion. Tomorrow, his quiet discovery would become public knowledge. Tomorrow, everything would change. But tonight, he crawled into bed in the manager's suite of his impossible hotel, and he slept soundly for the first time since his wife had left, because he finally understood what it felt like to be part of something bigger than survival. He was part of restoration, not just of paintings but of purpose, not just of a building but of belief. The belief that beautiful things were meant to be shared, that regular people deserved access to extraordinary experiences, and that sometimes the most unlikely person was exactly who the universe chose to make it happen. Marcus closed his eyes and dreamed of a future where Sophie led school groups through galleries, where families from across the country came to see art they'd never thought they'd experience, where George and Thomas Hartley's vision finally became the reality they'd planned but never lived to see. And in the basement below, protected by stone and climate control and decades of patient waiting, 67 masterpieces sat in the dark, ready to step into the light at last. The press release went out on a cold December morning. Dr. Chase had coordinated everything carefully. Major news outlets, art publications, local media. The headline was simple but explosive. Lost Hartley collection discovered in abandoned North Carolina hotel. $285 million art trove found by single father. Marcus stood in the hotel lobby watching his phone explode with notifications. Calls, texts, emails, all from numbers he didn't recognize. News vans started arriving within 3 hours. "Mr. Webb, can we get a statement?" "Marcus, is it true you bought the hotel for $7,500? "Sir, what are your plans for the collection?" Dr. Chase had warned him this would happen. She'd coached him on what to say, what not to say. Stick to the foundation plan. Emphasize George Hartley's vision. Don't discuss specific valuations. Don't speculate on legal matters. But standing there with cameras in his face and microphones shoved at him, Marcus's mind went blank. He was a maintenance worker. He fixed toilets and changed air filters. He wasn't built for this. He stammered. I just want to honor the original owner's wishes. These paintings were meant to be shared. Are you planning to sell them? No, we're establishing a non-profit foundation. How does it feel to suddenly be worth hundreds of millions? I'm not worth anything. The paintings are, and they're not mine to keep. They belong to everyone. That quote would be on every news site by evening. Marcus Webb, the reluctant millionaire, the single dad who found a fortune and didn't want to keep it. The story went viral. Within 24 hours, it was national news. Within 48, international. A human interest piece that had everything. Struggling father, abandoned hotel, hidden treasure, plans for public good. It was irresistible. Marcus's phone never stopped ringing. He had to change his number twice. Reporters camped outside the hotel. Someone started a GoFundMe to help Marcus Webb restore the hotel without his permission. It raised $80,000 in 3 days. Sophie saw her dad on the news at school. Kids gathered around tablets, whispering. Some were amazed, others skeptical. By lunch, the teasing started. Your dad's lying. There's no way he found all that. My mom says he probably stole it. You're going to be so rich. Why are you still wearing old shoes? Sophie came home quiet that afternoon. Marcus was dealing with his 5th reporter of the day and didn't notice at first. When he finally sat down with her, she was doing homework at the kitchen table in the manager's suite, her eyes red. Baby, what's wrong? Nothing. Sophie, she looked up. Kids at school are saying mean things, that you're a liar, that we don't deserve the paintings, that you should give them to a real museum. Marcus's jaw clenched. He pulled up a chair beside her. What do you think? I think, she said carefully, that you found something special, and you're trying to do the right thing. But I also think maybe they're right. Maybe we're not fancy enough for stuff like that. Hey. Marcus turned her chin gently so she'd look at him. Art doesn't care if you're fancy. Beauty doesn't check your bank account at the door. That's exactly why we're doing this. So kids like you, like me, like anyone, can see these paintings without feeling like they don't belong. But what if you mess it up? What if we lose everything? Marcus couldn't promise her they wouldn't. He pulled her into a hug instead. Then we'll still have each other. That's what matters. But privately, Marcus worried she was right. The legal letters started arriving the following week. First from a law firm in Boston representing distant Hartley relatives Marcus didn't know existed. George's second cousin's grandchildren claiming the collection should have been included in the estate settlement from 1998. Then from the county, questioning whether the sale of the property had been conducted properly, suggesting the collection should revert to public ownership. Then from an insurance company that had paid out a claim in 1947 for one of the paintings, now arguing they held ownership rights. Then the IRS, with questions about unreported asset acquisition and potential tax liability on a $285 million windfall. Marcus sat at the kitchen table surrounded by legal documents he couldn't understand, feeling the walls close in. Dr. Chase had connected him with a pro bono legal team, but even they seemed overwhelmed by the scope of challenges. This is going to take years to sort out, the lead attorney told him, a sharp woman named Patricia Rodriguez. Multiple lawsuits, probably appeals. You need to prepare for a long fight. I don't have years. I have maybe 3 months before I can't pay the property taxes. The foundation will help once it's established. The foundation can't be established until the ownership is legally clear. Exactly. It's circular, which is why you need to hold on. But holding on got harder every day. The media attention brought more than just reporters. Treasure hunters showed up trying to sneak into the basement. Marcus had to install cameras and motion sensors he couldn't afford. One night, someone cut through the fence and tried to break in through a first-floor window. The alarm scared them off, but it scared Sophie worse. Daddy, What if someone comes while we're sleeping? Marcus started sleeping with a baseball bat next to his bed. He hated it. Hated that his daughter was afraid in the place that was supposed to be their sanctuary. The town's reaction split down the middle. Some locals supported him. The woman who ran the gas station started a petition supporting the foundation plan. The librarian organized a town hall meeting where Marcus could explain his intentions. But others resented him, thought he'd gotten lucky and should share the wealth. Graffiti appeared on the hotel's exterior wall. "Give it back!" Someone slashed his truck tires. Twice. At the diner, Marcus overheard two men talking in the booth behind him. "He's gonna sell it all and disappear. You watch." Nah, he's smarter than that. He'll donate a couple pieces for the tax write-off and keep the rest. Either way, this town won't see a dime. Marcus left his coffee unfinished and walked out. He understood their skepticism. In their position, he'd probably think the same thing. Promises were cheap. People let you down, especially when money was involved. But it still hurt. By January, Marcus was running on fumes. The donated money from Dr. Chase and her colleagues had covered December's bills, but January's were piling up. The legal fees, even pro bono, had administrative costs. The security system had a monthly monitoring fee. The insurance he'd finally gotten was astronomical. Sophie's school sent another notice about her lunch account. Marcus sat in his truck in the school parking lot and cried, surrounded by potential wealth and couldn't afford to feed his kid. His phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. "Is this Marcus Webb?" An older woman's voice, refined but warm. "Yes." "My name is Margaret Hartley. I'm George's younger sister. I've been trying to reach you." Marcus sat up straight. "Miss Hartley, I'm sorry, I didn't know George had family still living." "It's just me. I'm 89, in assisted living in Charlotte. I saw the news coverage. My grandson showed me on his computer. I wanted to call sooner, but I'm not very good with these modern phones." "I understand. Look, if this is about the collection, I'm working with lawyers to—" "No, dear. I'm calling to help you." Marcus blinked. "Help me?" Those vultures claiming to be George's family, their distant cousins who never spoke to him while he was alive, came sniffing around after he died looking for money too. Found nothing then because George was smarter than they were. He'd be furious knowing they're trying again. "You support what I'm trying to do?" Margaret's voice softened. "Before George died, I visited him at that hotel. He was 86, failing. He showed me the gallery, told me about Thomas, about their plans for a foundation. He said the collection was his apology to the world for being selfish enough to lock it away after Thomas died." She paused. "He wanted people to see it, especially people who normally couldn't. He believed art was medicine for broken things." Marcus's throat tightened. "That's what I'm trying to do. Create a space where anyone can come. Free admission for kids, low cost for adults, art education programs, exactly what he and Thomas wanted." "I know. I've been following the coverage. And Marcus, I want to help. I have documents. Letters from George explicitly stating his wishes for the collection. Correspondence with the lawyer who helped draft the original foundation plans. Evidence that will shut down these ridiculous lawsuits." "You'd testify?" "I'd do more than testify. I'd join your foundation board if you'll have an old woman who can barely work a cell phone." Marcus felt something crack open in his chest. "Why? You don't even know me." "Because George trusted that collection to fate, and fate brought it to someone who sees it the way he did. Not as dollar signs, but as something sacred." Her voice grew firm. "You're fighting for my brother's legacy. That makes you family." Marcus had to pull over because he was crying too hard to drive safely. For the first time since this all started, someone was on his side, not because of what they could gain, but because they believed in what he was trying to do. Margaret's documents arrived 3 days later via courier. Letters, legal drafts, even photographs of George and Thomas standing in the gallery during construction. But the most powerful piece was a handwritten letter from George dated December 1997, a year before he died. To whom it may concern, it read, "I sealed my art collection in 1978 because I couldn't bear to look at beauty after losing my son. It was cowardice disguised as grief. Thomas would have wanted the world to see these pieces. He believed art belonged to everyone, not locked in vaults for the wealthy. If you're reading this, I'm gone. Whoever owns the Grandview Hotel owns the collection. I ask only this: share it, make it accessible. Honor my son's vision that beauty should heal, not divide. George Hartley." Patricia Rodriguez nearly wept when Marcus showed her. "This changes everything. We can file this as evidence of donor intent. Combined with Margaret's testimony, we can defeat the estate claims." "What about the insurance company?" "That's trickier. But with Margaret's help and George's explicit wishes documented, we have a strong case for keeping the collection intact rather than breaking it up for claims." "And the IRS?" Patricia grimaced. "That's going to be painful. You'll owe taxes on the acquisition. But as a donation to a non-profit, we can structure it to minimize damage. You'll still owe something, probably in the six figures." Marcus laughed hollowly. "I have $43. We'll figure it out, one crisis at a time." But the crises kept multiplying. In late January, two men in dark suits showed up at the hotel. They weren't reporters or lawyers. They were something else. "Mr. Webb, we'd like to discuss a business opportunity." Marcus met them in the lobby, every instinct screaming, "Who are you?" "Representatives of interested collectors. Our clients would like to make you an offer for select pieces from the collection." "It's not for sale." "Everything's for sale, Mr. Webb. Our clients are prepared to offer $75 million for 10 pieces of your choosing. Cash, offshore account, no taxes, no legal headaches. You walk away wealthy. We get the art. Everyone's happy." "I said it's not for sale." The taller one smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You have a daughter, Sophie, right? 8 years old, goes to Mountain View Elementary." Marcus went very still. "Are you threatening my kid?" "We're simply pointing out that you have vulnerabilities. Raising a child alone is expensive, dangerous even. Accidents happen. It would be unfortunate if Sophie's safety became a concern because her father made poor decisions." Marcus took a step forward, fists clenched. "Get the hell off my property." They didn't move. "We'll give you 1 week to reconsider. After that, our clients get less patient and less polite." They left. Marcus stood shaking with rage and terror. He called Patricia immediately. "You need to contact the FBI," she said. "That was a clear threat, probably organized crime with connections to black market art dealers." "What can the FBI do?" "Investigate. Provide protection if necessary. Marcus, these people are serious. They've probably been watching the news coverage, waiting for an opportunity." The FBI agents arrived the next day. They took Marcus's statement, installed additional security, and recommended he send Sophie somewhere safe temporarily. "We've seen this before," the lead agent explained. "High-value art attracts dangerous attention. Collections have been stolen, owners intimidated, even killed. Until we identify who's behind the threat, your daughter shouldn't be here." Marcus called his sister Angela in Tennessee that night. They hadn't spoken much since their mother's funeral 5 years ago. Different lives, different worlds. But she answered on the second ring. "Marcus, is everything okay?" "No, Angela, I need help. Can Sophie stay with you for a while, maybe a few weeks?" "Of course. What's going on?" He explained everything. The hotel, the collection, the threats. Angela listened without interrupting. "My God, Marcus, you're in over your head." "I know, but I can't walk away. This is bigger than me. Send Sophie here, tomorrow if you can. She'll be safe." Packing Sophie's bag was the hardest thing Marcus had ever done. She cried. He cried. He promised it was temporary, just until things settled down. But he could see the fear in her eyes that maybe she was losing another parent. "I'm coming back for you," he promised. holding her tight at the bus station. 2 weeks, maybe 3. Then you'll be home and this will all be over. Promise. Promise. He watched the bus pull away and felt like his heart went with it. He drove back to the hotel alone and sat in the empty manager's suite, surrounded by silence. This was what it had come to. His daughter was gone because he'd tried to do the right thing. Strangers threatened violence. Lawyers circled like sharks. The press painted him as either a saint or a fraud, depending on the outlet, and all he'd wanted was to give Sophie a home. Marcus walked down to the gallery that night and stood among the paintings. They looked different now, less like treasures and more like burdens. Beautiful, precious burdens he was bleeding to protect. He thought about the offer. 75 million. He could take it, pay off the threats, the legal fees, set Sophie up for life, disappear somewhere quiet. The paintings would go to private collectors, locked in penthouses and vaults. Exactly what George feared, exactly what Thomas died trying to prevent. Marcus picked up Thomas's landscape again, the simple mountain sunset. He'd looked at it dozens of times now. Each time he saw something new, the way light touched the peaks, the warmth in colors that suggested hope even as day ended. Thomas had been 34 when he died. Marcus was 34 now. They'd both loved someone enough to sacrifice for them. Thomas for his father, Marcus for his daughter. But Thomas had also believed beauty should be shared, had died driving home with a painting to add to a collection meant for everyone. Marcus set the painting down carefully. He wasn't going to sell, wasn't going to let threats or lawsuits or poverty scare him into betraying what this collection represented. But he needed a different plan. The foundation route was too slow. Legal challenges would take years. He needed something faster, stronger, something that would generate protection and support before the wolves circled closer. He called Dr. Chase. It was 11 at night, but she answered immediately. "Marcus, what's wrong? I need to accelerate the timeline. The threats are real. Sophie's gone to my sister's. I can't wait months for legal resolution." "What are you proposing?" "We open now, partial opening, before the foundation is fully established. We bring the public in, generate goodwill, create momentum that makes it harder for people to stop us." "That's risky. The legal questions aren't resolved." "I know, but right now I'm alone defending this place. If we open it, if people see what we're trying to build, we'll have allies, community support, public pressure to let it happen." Silence. Then, "It's bold, possibly reckless, but it might work. Help me do it, please." "Okay, let's make some calls." Over the next 2 weeks, Dr. Chase assembled a team. Judith, the conservator, agreed to help prepare the gallery for visitors. Howard, the provenance expert, donated his time to create educational materials. Margaret Hartley agreed to be present for the opening, lending her family name as endorsement. They set a date. February 14th, Valentine's Day. A day about love, about sharing something precious. Marcus worked 20-hour days preparing. They couldn't open the entire collection yet, legal liability, but they could open 15 pieces in a secured section. They installed proper lighting, velvet ropes, security cameras. Margaret's grandson, a college student studying graphic design, created brochures explaining George and Thomas's vision. The local paper ran a front-page story. Hartley Gallery to open Valentine's Day, free admission for all. The response was immediate. People from across the region requested tickets. Schools asked about field trips. Art professors wanted to bring classes. A tour bus company inquired about adding them to routes. But the legal teams representing the Hartley relatives filed an emergency injunction, arguing Marcus had no right to display the collection while ownership was disputed. Patricia fought back, filed Margaret's documents, argued that preventing public access violated George's explicit wishes, requested an expedited hearing. The judge, an elderly woman who'd practiced law in North Carolina for 40 years, read everything carefully. "This is unusual," she said from the bench. We have a property owner trying to give away access to something worth hundreds of millions. Usually people fight to keep things, not share them. Your Honor, the opposing counsel argued, the ownership is disputed. Opening the gallery risks damage to priceless art. Mr. Webb has installed professional-grade security and climate control, Patricia countered. He's brought in expert conservators. He's doing everything right. The judge looked at Marcus. Mr. Webb, why are you in such a hurry? Why not wait for the legal process to conclude? Marcus stood. Because every day these paintings sit in a basement, they're not doing what they were meant to do. George Hartley's son died believing art should be accessible. George spent 47 years regretting that he locked it away. I'm trying to honor them both. And because, his voice cracked slightly, my daughter is scared and hiding in another state because people want to steal this collection. Opening it to the public is the best protection I can give it. The judge was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke. I'm denying the injunction. Mr. Webb may open the gallery pending resolution of ownership claims. However, all proceeds must be held in escrow. No pieces may be sold or moved. And Mr. Webb, if any damage occurs, you will be held liable. Yes, Your Honor, thank you. The opposing counsel looked furious, but it was done. Marcus called Angela that night. Tell Sophie she can come home. We're opening the gallery on Valentine's Day. Marcus, are you sure it's safe? No, but it's right. And sometimes that has to be enough. The morning of February 14th dawned cold and clear. Marcus stood on the hotel's front porch, watching the sun rise over the mountains, the same view Thomas had painted decades ago. Cars were already lining up on the road, waiting for the 10 a.m. opening. Dr. Chase arrived early, looking nervous and excited. Margaret came with her grandson, moving slowly but determined. Judith did a final check of the climate controls. Howard positioned himself near the entrance, ready to answer questions. At 9:45, Marcus walked down to the gallery one last time before opening. The 15 paintings they'd chosen hung perfectly lit, each one a masterpiece. The Monet, a Degas, 2 Van Goghs, the Rothko. Pieces that represented the breadth and beauty of the full collection. And in the center, Thomas's landscape, the simple mountain sunset that proved you didn't need fame or fortune to create something that mattered. Marcus heard footsteps on the stairs. Dr. Chase appeared. It's time, she said gently. Are you ready? Marcus looked around the gallery one last time, thought of George and Thomas, of 47 years of darkness, of his daughter who'd asked if they were fancy enough for art like this. Yeah, he said. Let's share it. They climbed the stairs together. The crowd outside had grown to over 200 people. Families, college students, elderly couples, children pressed against the glass, trying to see inside. Marcus opened the doors. They came in slowly at first, almost reverently. Then the whispers started. Oh my God, is that real? I've only seen that in textbooks. Honey, look at this one. Look at the colors. A woman in her 70s stood in front of the Monet and started crying. I never thought I'd see one in person. A teenage boy stared at the Rothko for 10 solid minutes, transfixed. When Marcus walked past, the kid whispered, how did he make it feel like emotions? Children ran from painting to painting, not touching but excited, pointing, asking parents questions. One little girl, maybe 6, stood in front of Thomas's landscape and said, that looks like my mountain. Marcus had to step outside. The emotions were too big for the room. He sat on the front steps, watching more people arrive, and let himself feel it. Pride, terror, grief for George and Thomas, hope for Sophie, exhaustion, triumph. It all mixed together until he couldn't tell one from another. Margaret found him there. She sat down carefully, her grandson hovering nearby in case she needed help. George would be proud, she said quietly. This is exactly what he wanted. What they both wanted. I hope so. I'm terrified I'm going to mess it up. She patted his hand with her papery, thin fingers. You already succeeded. Those people in there, they're experiencing beauty they never would have otherwise. That's the mission. Everything else is just details. Inside, Dr. Chase was giving an impromptu talk about the collection's history. Howard was showing a family the provenance documents. Judith was explaining conservation techniques to a group of art students. And throughout the gallery, regular people stood in front of extraordinary art, seeing themselves reflected in beauty they'd been told wasn't for them. Marcus watched a father lift his daughter up so she could see a painting better. The girl's face lit up with wonder. That's what this was about. Not money, not legal victories, not even honoring George and Thomas, though that mattered. It was about that little girl's face, the reminder that beauty belonged to everyone, that art could make you feel less alone, that sometimes the most important thing wasn't owning something precious, but sharing it. By day's end, over 400 people had come through. The guest book was full of comments. "Thank you for sharing this. My kids will never forget this day. You restored my faith that good people still exist." Marcus read them all that night, sitting in the quiet gallery after everyone left. His body ached. His bank account was still nearly empty. Legal battles waited. Threats still loomed. But they'd done it. They'd opened the doors, let the light in. And once light gets in, it's a lot harder to push back into darkness. The week after the opening, everything accelerated. The local news coverage went national again, but this time the tone was different. Before, Marcus had been the lucky nobody who found treasure. Now, he was the man who chose to share it. "Single father opens priceless art gallery to public despite legal battles," the headlines read. "Free admission proves art is for everyone." The visitor numbers tripled. People drove from 6 states away. Art professors brought entire classes. The local elementary school scheduled field trips. Sophie's school called to ask if they could visit, and Marcus said yes immediately. The day Sophie's class came, Marcus stood in the back and watched his daughter guide her classmates through the gallery. She'd memorized facts about each painting, practiced her presentation with him the night before. The same kids who'd mocked her 2 months ago now listened intently as she explained Van Gogh's brushwork. "My dad says art is medicine for broken things," Sophie told them, standing in front of Thomas's landscape. "I think that means it helps us feel less alone." One boy raised his hand. "Is your dad really going to give all this away?" Sophie looked back at Marcus and he nodded. She turned back to her class. "He's not giving it away. He's sharing it. There's a difference." After the kids left, Sophie ran to Marcus and hugged him tight. "I was so nervous." "You were perfect, baby. I'm so proud of you." "Can I come home now? Aunt Angela's nice, but I miss you. I miss our hotel." Marcus knelt down to her level. "The FBI says it's safe. No more threats since we opened. So yeah, you can come home." "Really?" "Really. I'll drive to Tennessee this weekend and bring you back." Sophie threw her arms around his neck so hard she nearly knocked him over, and for the first time in months, Marcus felt like they might actually make it through this. But the legal battles intensified. The Hartley relatives, seeing the gallery's success, doubled down on their claims. They argued that opening the collection proved Marcus was profiting from stolen inheritance. "He's exploiting our family legacy for personal gain," their lawyer declared at a press conference. Margaret responded with her own press conference the next day. At 89, sitting in her wheelchair, she spoke with quiet fury. "I am the last living person who knew George Hartley personally. I was his sister for 80 years. These distant cousins," she gestured dismissively, "sent him a Christmas card once in 1983. That was the extent of their family devotion. They want money, not legacy. Marcus Webb wants to honor my brother's wishes. I stand with him completely." The public reaction was swift. Social media erupted in Marcus's defense. Petitions circulated supporting the foundation. Even politicians started weighing in, seeing which way the wind blew. But the insurance company's claim was harder to dismiss. They had documentation that they'd paid out $200,000 in 1947 for one of the paintings, reported stolen from a French estate during World War II. Patricia worked the case brilliantly. She argued that George Hartley had purchased the painting legally in 1952 from a reputable dealer with full provenance documentation. The painting hadn't been stolen, just misplaced during wartime chaos and later sold by the rightful heir. The insurance company was paid 78 years ago, Patricia argued in court. They profited from that claim. They can't now claim ownership of an asset that was legally sold years after their payout. That's double dipping. The judge agreed. Dismissed the insurance claim, one threat down. The IRS was trickier. They calculated Marcus owed $17 million in taxes on the acquisition of the collection. The fact that he'd bought the property for $7,500 but received assets worth $285 million created massive tax liability. "We don't have $17 million, Marcus said, stating the obvious. "We don't have $17,000. Patricia met with IRS attorneys for weeks, negotiating. Finally, they reached an agreement. If Marcus formally donated the collection to a qualified non-profit within 6 months, established educational programs, and took no salary for the first 3 years, the IRS would accept a structured payment plan of $300,000 over 10 years. It was still a crushing amount for someone who'd started with nothing, but it was survivable. "How am I going to pay $300,000 over 10 years?" Marcus asked Dr. Chase. "The foundation will generate revenue," she explained, "not from selling art but from museum operations, admission fees for adults, though we keep it low, rental fees for the event spaces in the hotel, grants and donations, merchandise. It's doable if we're smart." "You keep saying we," Marcus said quietly. "Why are you still here? This isn't your problem." Dr. Chase looked at him over her coffee. They were sitting in the hotel kitchen, going over budgets at midnight. It had become their routine. "Do you want me to leave?" "No. God, no. I just don't understand why you care so much." She was quiet for a moment. "I've spent my whole career studying art that's locked away in private collections and exclusive museums, places that charge $30 admission and make regular people feel unwelcome. This," she gestured around the hotel, "this is everything I've ever believed art should be. And you made it happen, Marcus. A maintenance worker with no training and no money made happen what museums with billion-dollar budgets won't do. How could I not care?" There was something in her voice that made Marcus's chest tighten, something beyond professional admiration. He saw it in how she looked at him sometimes when she thought he wasn't paying attention. How she'd started bringing him coffee the way he liked it. How she'd shown Sophie's pictures to everyone, proud as if the girl was her own. "Ellen," he started, using her first name for the first time. "We should focus on the grant applications," she interrupted, but her cheeks were pink. "The National Endowment deadline is next week." They worked until 2 a.m., close enough that their arms occasionally brushed, both pretending not to notice. By April, the foundation paperwork was complete. The Hartley Legacy Foundation officially registered as a 501c3 nonprofit. The board consisted of Margaret, Dr. Chase, Judith the conservator, Howard the provenance expert, and Marcus as founder and director. They held their first official board meeting in the hotel's restored dining room. Marcus had spent 3 months fixing it up. New windows, refinished floors, the original chandelier rewired and gleaming. "First order of business," Margaret said, rapping her cane on the table. "Director's salary. Marcus, you can't work for free forever. The IRS agreement says no salary for 3 years. The IRS agreement says no salary from the foundation," Patricia clarified. She'd joined as legal counsel. "But the foundation can hire you as hotel manager separately. That's a different budget line." They voted unanimously, $35,000 a year as hotel manager. It wasn't much, but it was more than Marcus had made at the Valley Inn, enough to support Sophie, pay bills, maybe even save a little. Marcus sat there feeling overwhelmed. 6 months ago, he'd been counting pennies for school lunch. Now he had a salary, a purpose, and a team of people who believed in what they were building.
"Thank you," he managed. "All of you. I couldn't do this alone."
"Good thing you're not alone then," Margaret said with a smile. The transformation of the hotel accelerated. Grants came through. The National Endowment for the Arts approved funding for educational programming. A private foundation dedicated to art accessibility donated $200,000 for renovations. Volunteers showed up every weekend to help restore guest rooms. By summer, they had converted 12 rooms into artist residency spaces. Painters, sculptors, and photographers could apply for free month-long stays, with the only requirement being that they teach one community workshop per week. The first resident was a 72-year-old watercolor artist from Kentucky who'd never had gallery representation. She cried when Marcus handed her the keys to her room.
"I've painted for 50 years in my basement," she said. "No one's ever treated it like real art before."
"It is real art," Marcus told her. "And you're a real artist. Welcome home." She taught watercolor classes to local kids every Saturday. Sophie attended every single one, her paintings taped proudly to the manager's suite walls. The gallery expanded too. By August, they'd opened access to 30 pieces, still keeping the most valuable secured. But even 30 paintings from the Hartley collection were enough to draw visitors from across the country. A travel magazine named them one of the 10 hidden gem museums in America. A documentary crew came to film. Art education programs started citing them as a model for accessibility. And slowly, cautiously, the town of Blue Hollow changed its tune. The gas station owner told Marcus the hotel brought more customers than she'd seen in 20 years. The diner hired 3 new servers to handle the tourist traffic. The bookstore started stocking art history titles. The graffiti got painted over. The slashed tires stopped. People who'd been suspicious started nodding hello. One evening, Marcus was fixing a loose board on the front porch when a truck pulled up. 3 men got out, all wearing work clothes, all locals who'd been vocal critics before. Marcus tensed, ready for confrontation. The oldest one, a guy named Duke who owned the hardware store, walked up and held out his hand. "Wanted to apologize. We figured you were running a scam, but you're doing right by this place, by the town. My granddaughter came on a school trip and hasn't stopped talking about it, so we're sorry for doubting you." Marcus shook his hand, throat tight. "No apology needed. I'd have doubted me too." "We brought something." Duke gestured to the truck. They unloaded lumber, already cut and measured. "For the back deck. Heard you were trying to build an outdoor sculpture garden. Figured we could help." They worked until sunset, refusing payment. Just neighbors helping neighbors, the way small towns were supposed to work. That night, Marcus sat on the newly reinforced deck with Sophie, watching stars emerge over the mountains. "Daddy," Sophie said, leaning against his shoulder, "are we rich now?" Marcus thought about it. "In money? No, baby. We're doing okay, but we're not rich." "Then in what?" "In purpose, in community, in getting to be part of something that matters." He squeezed her close. "Yeah, in that, we're pretty rich." "Good," Sophie said. "Because Madison at school said her dad has 3 cars and a pool, but I told her my dad has Van Goghs and helps people. I think I won." Marcus laughed until tears ran down his face. By fall, the foundation had served over 12,000 visitors. They'd provided free art education to 800 children, hosted 6 exhibitions of local artists, given residencies to 14 emerging creators who couldn't afford traditional programs. The numbers weren't just statistics, they were lives touched, perspectives shifted, beauty shared, and quietly, away from the public eye, Marcus's relationship with Ellen deepened. It happened gradually, naturally. Late nights working became dinner together. Dinner became walks through the grounds.
Walks became hands held when no one was looking. Sophie noticed first. "Do you like Dr. Chase?" she asked one morning over breakfast. Marcus nearly choked on his coffee. "What? Why would you ask that?" "Because you smile different when she's here, like you used to smile in old pictures with Mom before she left." Marcus set down his mug carefully. "Would it bother you if I did like her?" Sophie considered this seriously. "Is she nice to you?" "Very. Does she make you happy?" "Yeah, she does." "Then no, it wouldn't bother me. You should be happy, Daddy. You make everyone else happy. You deserve it too." When had his 8-year-old become so wise? That evening, after the last visitor left and the gallery was locked, Marcus found Ellen in the library they'd set up in what used to be the hotel bar. She was cataloguing donations, glasses perched on her nose, completely absorbed. "Hey," he said from the doorway. She looked up and smiled, that smile that made his chest feel too small for his heart. "Come here often," she teased. "Only when there's someone worth visiting." She raised an eyebrow. "Marcus Webb, are you flirting with me?" "Maybe. Is it working?" "Depends. What are your intentions?" He walked over, sat on the edge of the desk. "My intentions are to thank you for saving my life, for believing in this when no one else did, for teaching my daughter that smart women change the world, for making me feel like I'm not just surviving anymore." Ellen's eyes got bright. "Marcus, I know the timing's complicated. I know I'm still figuring out my life. But Ellen, you make me want to be better, braver. And I just thought you should know that." She stood, closing the distance between them. "I moved here, you know. Took a leave of absence from Duke. Rented a house in town. Told myself it was for the foundation work. But that's not the whole truth." "What's the whole truth?" "The whole truth is I fell for a maintenance worker who turned out to be the most remarkable man I've ever met, who fights for beauty even when it costs him everything, who makes his daughter pancakes in the shape of paintbrushes, who sees art the way it's meant to be seen, as connection, not commodity." Marcus stood too, his heart hammering. "Sophie asked if I liked you. I told her yes. She said I deserved to be happy." "Smart kid. She gets it from her environment. Very educational around here." Ellen laughed, and then Marcus kissed her, soft and careful and full of the hope he'd finally let himself feel again. When they pulled apart, she was smiling. "So what now?" she asked. "Now we keep building, together if you want." "I want," they told Sophie the next day. She responded by insisting Ellen come to her watercolor class and paint with them. Watching Ellen gamely attempt a sunset while Sophie offered serious artistic critique made Marcus fall even harder. Winter came. The hotel transformed into something magical. They strung lights through the pines, hosted a holiday art market featuring local creators, offered free hot chocolate and gallery tours decorated with seasonal exhibits. On Christmas Eve, they held a community gathering, open to everyone. Margaret was there, now 90, still fierce as ever. The town showed up, the ones who'd doubted and the ones who'd believed from the start. Artists who'd been through residencies, families who'd brought their kids a dozen times. Marcus stood on the grand staircase and looked out at the crowd filling the lobby. Sophie was showing a group of children her favorite paintings. Ellen was talking with a reporter. Patricia was arguing good-naturedly with Margaret about the foundation's next expansion. "Speech!" someone called out. "Speech! Speech!" Others joined. Marcus raised his hands. "I'm not good at speeches!" "Try anyway," Duke shouted from the back. Marcus took a breath. "Okay. A year ago, I was broke, desperate, and terrified I was failing my daughter. I bought this place with my last $7,500 because I couldn't afford anything else and thought maybe I could give Sophie a home." The room quieted. "I had no idea what was under these floors. No idea that a man named George Hartley had spent 47 years protecting a collection he couldn't bear to look at. No idea that his son Thomas had died trying to share beauty with the world.
No idea that opening some doors would change my entire life. He looked at Sophie, who grinned at him, at Ellen, who nodded encouragement, at Margaret, whose eyes were wet. But here's what I learned. Wealth isn't money, it's purpose. It's waking up knowing you're part of something bigger than yourself. It's watching your daughter lead art classes because she finally believes she belongs. It's seeing strangers stand in front of paintings and remember they're allowed to feel things. His voice thickened. George and Thomas wanted to share these paintings, wanted regular people, people like me, like all of us, to experience beauty without barriers. It took me to finally make that happen, and I'm just some guy who knows how to fix broken things. But maybe that's exactly who needed to find this place. Someone broken enough to understand what healing looks like. The room was silent, except for scattered sniffles. So thank you for believing in this, for protecting it, for proving that communities can still choose generosity over greed. Every person who walks through these doors and feels less alone, that's because of all of you. This isn't my legacy, it's ours. The applause started small and built until the chandelier rattled. People stood. Someone started singing Silent Night and others joined, the old carol filling the restored lobby like a prayer. Marcus felt Ellen's hand slip into his, felt Sophie press against his other side. And standing there in the hotel that had saved his life while saving George Hartley's legacy, Marcus understood what wealth really meant. What happens when a struggling father's desperate gamble becomes the catalyst for an entire community's transformation will remind you why some risks are worth taking, prove that beauty belongs to everyone, and show you that sometimes the most broken people are the ones who know best how to heal the world. If you're still with us, please like, share, and subscribe for more incredible stories. The next year brought challenges Marcus had stopped expecting. Good ones. The foundation thrived. Visitor numbers doubled. They received applications for artist residencies from 43 states and 6 countries. Major museums started requesting loan arrangements for pieces from the collection, offering substantial fees that helped fund operations. By spring, they'd fully restored 28 of the hotel's 95 rooms. Half became residency spaces. The rest opened as a bed and breakfast, with proceeds funding the foundation. Staying at the Hartley Hotel became a destination experience. Art lovers booked months in advance. Sophie turned 10. She'd grown confident, articulate, passionate about art education. She started a kids' art club that met Saturdays, teaching younger children the way the resident artists had taught her. "I want to be a museum director when I grow up," she announced one day. "Like you, Daddy, but better." "Better how?" Marcus asked, amused. "You didn't go to college. I'm going to go to college and learn all the official stuff, then come back and help you run this place properly." Ellen, who'd been listening, laughed. "Your dad runs it pretty well already." "Yeah, but imagine how good it'll be with me helping." Marcus couldn't argue with that logic. The legal battles finally resolved that summer. The Hartley relatives dropped their lawsuit after Margaret passed away peacefully in her sleep at 91. Her will left her entire estate to the foundation with a pointed note. "To the vultures who claim to care about family legacy while ignoring my brother's wishes, you get nothing. To Marcus Webb, who honored George and Thomas better than blood relatives ever did, I leave everything I have, build something beautiful." Her grandson, who'd helped design the original brochures, joined the board. The family's official endorsement silenced remaining critics. The IRS accepted their final tax payment structure. The paintings were officially, legally, permanently part of the foundation. Marcus could finally breathe without wondering if someone would seize it all. By the second anniversary of opening, the Hartley Legacy Foundation had become a model. Other museums studied their approach. Art education programs replicated their free access model. Foundations dedicated to cultural accessibility used them as proof of concept. But more importantly, they'd changed lives. A woman wrote that she'd been suicidal until she visited the gallery. Standing in front of the Rothko made her feel something beyond her pain. She got help. She was still here. A veteran with PTSD came weekly, said the quiet gallery was the only place his mind settled. He'd started painting in his apartment. It helped. A teenager from a nearby town got her first residency at 16. Her sculptures now sold in galleries across the southeast. She credited the Hartley Foundation with saving her from a path that would have destroyed her. Thousands of letters like that, each one a reminder that George and Thomas had been right. Art was medicine for broken things. One October evening, Marcus and Ellen sat on the back deck watching the mountains turn purple in the dusk. They'd been officially together for over a year now. Ellen had made her move permanent, accepted a part-time teaching position at a nearby college, and spent the rest of her time with the foundation. Sophie adored her, called her Ellen Mom sometimes, which made Ellen's eyes get misty. "I've been thinking," Ellen said, leaning against Marcus's shoulder. "Dangerous activity." She swatted his arm. "Seriously, we should expand the collection. We have 67 masterpieces. How much more do we need? Not buy more, commission more. Local artists, emerging voices, people who'd never get institutional support otherwise. Create a permanent contemporary wing. Show that art isn't just old dead guys, it's living, breathing, happening now." Marcus turned to look at her. "That's brilliant." "I know," she said smugly. "I'm occasionally brilliant." "Occasionally?" "Don't push it." They applied for grants, raised funds through a campaign that emphasized supporting living artists. By the following spring, they'd commissioned works from 20 local and regional artists, paintings, sculptures, installations, pieces that reflected the community, the mountains, the spirit of accessibility that defined the foundation. The contemporary wing opened to massive crowds. People loved seeing their own experiences reflected in art, loved meeting the artists, loved that this wasn't some stuffy museum, but a living, growing celebration of creativity. One of the commissioned artists was a 68-year-old black woman who'd worked as a housekeeper her whole life, painting in secret. Her work was extraordinary. Bold colors, powerful themes of labor and dignity. The foundation gave her a solo exhibition. She stood at the opening, surrounded by people praising her work, and sobbed. "I thought I'd die without anyone seeing these. I thought I didn't matter." "You matter," Marcus told her. "You always mattered. We just gave you the space to prove it." That quote made national news. The image of Marcus, the former maintenance worker, telling an elderly housekeeper artist that she mattered, captured something people needed to hear. That worth wasn't about credentials or money. It was about courage and vision, and refusing to let circumstances define you. Donations poured in. Foundations, individuals, even corporations wanting to align with the message. The Hartley Legacy Foundation became financially stable for the first time. Marcus could finally draw a real salary, $50,000 a year. Not wealthy, but comfortable. Enough to save for Sophie's college. Enough to take Ellen on an actual vacation. Enough to breathe. On their 3rd anniversary, the foundation held a gala. Not fancy, they kept ticket prices low so anyone could attend. But they celebrated everything they'd accomplished. Over 35,000 visitors in 3 years, 1,000 children through education programs, 40 artists supported through residencies, 15 commissioned works, partnerships with 18 schools. Margaret's grandson gave a speech honoring his great-aunt. Patricia talked about the legal journey. Judith discussed conservation triumphs. Then they invited Marcus to speak. He stood at the podium, looking out at faces he'd come to know, visitors who'd become friends, volunteers who'd become family. Sophie in the front row next to Ellen, both of them smiling. 3 years ago, Marcus began, I was a maintenance worker who couldn't afford to feed my daughter properly. I bought this hotel in desperation, hoping to give Sophie a home. Instead, I found George Hartley's secret, A collection worth hundreds of millions, a legacy buried in grief. He paused, gathering his thoughts. People ask if I regret not selling it, if I wish I'd taken the money and disappeared. And honestly, for about 5 minutes when men were threatening my child, yeah, I regretted it. Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. But standing here now, seeing what we've built, there's not a doubt in my mind. This was always bigger than me, bigger than money. George and Thomas Hartley believed art should heal, should connect, should belong to everyone. They were stopped by tragedy. But their vision didn't die. It just waited for someone desperate enough and stupid enough to try making it real. More laughter, warmer this time. I'm not special. I'm just a guy who got lucky and tried not to screw it up too badly. But this foundation, this community, you're all special. You proved that people still believe in sharing over hoarding, in access over exclusivity, in beauty over profit. His voice cracked slightly. My daughter asked me once if we were rich. I told her we were rich in purpose. And every day, watching her lead art classes, watching visitors discover paintings that move them, watching artists get opportunities they'd never have otherwise, I know that's true. We're the richest people I know. The standing ovation lasted 3 minutes. Sophie ran up and hugged him. Ellen joined, and the three of them stood there while cameras flashed and people cheered. That night, after everyone left, Marcus walked through the empty gallery one more time. The lights were dimmed. The paintings rested in their perfect climate control. Peaceful, purposeful. He stopped at Thomas's landscape. The simple mountain sunset that had meant so much to him from the beginning. We did it, Marcus whispered to the painting, to Thomas's memory, to George's ghost if it was listening. We shared it, just like you wanted. The painting didn't answer, of course, but in the quiet of that underground gallery, Marcus felt something. Peace, maybe, or validation. The sense that he'd kept a promise to people he'd never met, but somehow knew intimately. He climbed the stairs one more time, locked the basement door, and went home. Home to the manager's suite. Home to Sophie already asleep, paintbrushes scattered across her desk. Home to Ellen reading in bed, looking up with a smile when he entered. Everything locked up? She asked. Everything secured? He sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly exhausted. Ellen, do you ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't bid on this place? Someone else would have found the collection eventually. But would they have done this? Built this? She set down her book and took his hand. Maybe, maybe not. But you did. That's what matters. I almost didn't. Almost let the auction pass. Almost decided it was too risky. But you didn't. You jumped, and look what happened. Marcus laid back, staring at the ceiling. I was so scared. Every day for months, just terrified I'd lose everything. You were brave. There's a difference. Bravery is just being too stubborn to quit. Ellen laughed. Maybe, but it's enough. They fell asleep like that, hands clasped, the hotel settling around them with the creaks and sighs of an old building finally at peace. The years rolled forward. Sophie grew. The foundation expanded. Marcus's hair started going grey at the temples, which Ellen said made him look distinguished. The hotel became part of the region's identity. Artists came from around the world. Visitors marked it as a must-see destination. But the thing Marcus loved most was the small moments. The kid who came every week and always stood in front of the same Van Gogh, finding something new each time. The elderly couple who held hands in the gallery and cried because they'd never thought they'd see such things in person. The young woman who proposed to her girlfriend in front of the Monet, both of them crying happy tears. Beauty connecting people, just like Thomas had believed it would. On the 5th anniversary, they unveiled the full collection. All 67 pieces in a newly constructed wing with state-of-the-art security and climate control. Visitors could now see the entire Hartley collection in one place. The opening was international news. Museums sent delegations. Collectors came to see what they'd never be allowed to own. Art historians documented everything. But the first tour went to Sophie's school class, 23 fifth graders from Blue Hollow Elementary, most of whom had never left the county, walking through galleries housing hundreds of millions in art. Sophie led the tour, now 12 and confident beyond her years. "This is the Hartley collection," she told her classmates. "My dad found it when I was 8. It used to be hidden because the owners thought regular people couldn't appreciate it, but my dad proved them wrong. Art belongs to everyone, even us." "Even us." Marcus watched from the doorway, Ellen beside him, and felt his eyes burn with tears. "You did good," Ellen whispered. "We did good," he corrected. That night, the hotel hosted a community dinner. Free food, live music, the galleries open late. It wasn't fancy, just neighbors celebrating together. Duke from the hardware store came with his granddaughter, the one who'd sparked his change of heart. She was 17 now, applying to art schools. The watercolor artist who'd been their first resident returned, now with gallery representation and a published book. Dozens of others whose lives had been touched by the foundation, not because they'd gotten rich, but because they'd been seen, valued, given space to create and grow. As the evening wound down, someone asked Marcus to say a few words. He'd learned to accept these moments without panic. 5 years ago, he said, voice carrying across the lobby, I stood in a county auction with $7,500 and a prayer. I was desperate, broke, scared my daughter would grow up feeling as small as I felt. Sophie smiled at him from across the room. She didn't feel small anymore, neither did he. I found something I didn't expect, not just paintings, though those are extraordinary. I found purpose, community, proof that when you trust people with beautiful things, they honor them. When you break down barriers, people rise to meet you. He looked around at faces illuminated by chandelier light. George and Thomas Hartley built this collection believing art could heal broken things. They were right. It healed me. It healed this town. It heals everyone who walks through these doors and remembers they're allowed to feel wonder. His voice softened. So thank you for letting a maintenance worker with no credentials and no money try something impossible. For protecting this place when others wanted to destroy it. For proving that beauty still matters, generosity still exists, and communities still care for each other. And most of all, thank you for teaching my daughter that she belongs anywhere beauty lives. Because of you, she'll never feel too small, too poor, or too ordinary to claim her space in the world. That's worth more than any collection. The room erupted in applause. Sophie pushed through the crowd and hugged him. Then Ellen joined, then others, until Marcus was surrounded by the community he'd helped build, and that had built him right back. Later, much later, when everyone had gone home and the hotel was quiet, Marcus sat on the front porch steps. The mountains rose dark against the star-filled sky. The same mountains Thomas had painted. The same mountains that had watched this old hotel transform from abandoned ruin to thriving center of art and education. Ellen found him there. Thought you might be out here. Just thinking. About what? About how different my life could have been. If I'd driven past that auction, if I'd been too scared to bid, if I'd sold the collection instead of fighting to share it. Regrets? Not even one. He pulled her close. I was so focused on survival for so long, I forgot what it felt like to actually live, to have purpose beyond just getting through the day. This place gave me that back. You gave it to yourself. You just needed the right catalyst. They sat in comfortable silence, watching stars wheel slowly overhead. Somewhere inside, the paintings rested in their perfect preservation. Masterpieces accessible to anyone brave enough to walk through the doors. Tomorrow would bring new visitors, new students, new artists, an endless cycle of sharing and connection and beauty made accessible. But tonight, Marcus just breathed, grateful, tired, content. Because anyone can change the world if they're stubborn enough to believe broken things deserve fixing.
brave enough to share what they could hoard, and wise enough to understand that true wealth isn't what you own, but what you give away. As the first hints of dawn touched the mountain peaks, Marcus stood and stretched. Another day waited. More tours to give, more connections to facilitate, more lives to touch with beauty that had waited 47 years to serve its purpose. He walked inside, Ellen's hand in his, ready to do it all again. Because some legacies aren't found in bank accounts or property deeds. They're found in the faces of children standing in front of their first Van Gogh, in artists given their first real chance, in communities remembering how to believe in generosity. And Marcus Webb, the maintenance worker who bought an abandoned hotel for $7,500 and found a fortune he chose to share instead of sell, had built a legacy that would outlive them all. Not because of what he'd discovered, but because of what he'd done with it. He'd let the light in, and once light gets in, it never really leaves. The end. Up next, 2 more powerful stories are waiting for you. Click to keep discovering tales of courage, transformation, and the extraordinary things that happen when ordinary people choose to do what's right instead of what's easy. And don't forget to hit subscribe if you believe some treasures are meant to be shared, not hoarded.